Right, let's start with the book. How to think like a fish. I mean, what I love about River Monsters is it's both incredibly exciting and it's peculiarly cerebral as well. You know, you seem to spend more time in fish markets than actually fishing.
Yes, I mean, we try. I don't think of it myself as a fishing show, but the TV. It is this very powerful medium. So I am on this program, which is classified as a fishing show. Therefore, in people's minds, I am a fishing expert. I don't see myself particularly as a fishing expert, or I'm certainly not a great all-rounder. What I do is a very sort of niche type of fishing. But people in the early days, when they could find my email, I kept getting all these questions. How do I catch more fish? How do I catch, a lot from Americans, because it's very popular out there. And I wouldn't be able to answer their specific questions. But I was brought up to believe, it's very rude if someone writes to you not to reply. So I've got to say something. And it made me think. And what it did over a period of time, it made me realise there's another level of sort of fundamental things about fishing, which sort of apply right across the board. And how to, telling people, imagine that you are the fish. Try and put your mind into the body of that unseen creature that you're after. That is one really good thing that you can do.
Well, it's very tough because they do see the world completely differently. I mean, they see through that lateral line more or less, don't they?
Absolutely, and particularly in a lot of rivers. I mean, not so much if you're a fly angler, but a lot of rivers are very muddy. Yeah, there's zero visibility, so they've got eyes, but they're not really seeing much. Or if they are seeing much, they're seeing it only when they get close. They are normally picking up what's going on through vibrations in the water. Sometimes, if you're a catfish and you've got tentacles, through smell and taste. And I think about it almost like, and they use different senses at different ranges. I almost think of, possibly a fighter pilot or something. You're flying through cloud, and you're picking up another plane on radar. And then you get to within a certain range, and then you've got visual. And fish are a bit like that. They're using different senses at different.
And they're working in 3 dimensions.
And in 3 dimensions, that's the other thing. Yeah. So we tend to think. I think a lot of people, they think if they put themselves beneath the water, they think of a person under the water. But a fish, again, the whole body, the whole, the physiology, the way they work. So gravity doesn't. They're affected by gravity, but they can move at will up and down. And this, how do you detect what's down there? And also the whole thing about, I fish still water and running water. But the thing about running water, you're fishing in this medium. It's a bit like being in a wind constantly, and that wind it's not just a uniform current. It's doing all sorts of interesting things. It's eddying, and if you're a fish, what you're doing, you're constantly after items of food. Where are they going to be? So. Just that one thing. Imagine that you're a fish, and that instantly is going to take your fishing to another level.
You're mapping your sort of 3D landscape all the time, and kind of evaluating it for danger, threat, safety, food, grub, cover, everything like that.
Absolutely. I mean, the word I sometimes use, fish are accountants. Now, this might sound a bit strange, but any living creature is an accountant, not in money terms, but in terms of energy. What you want to, what you must not do is end up with an energy deficit. So what you take in has always got to be more than what you're expending.
I'm going to have to ask you before. What happens is a shot goes on the screen behind like that, and I ask people to turn around, and then suddenly it's not on the screen. But what on earth is that?
That is, I had to sort of do a double take. That is a Mekong giant catfish. That's in a sort of a weird commercial fishery in Thailand. Very strange looking things. Although it's a catfish, they don't really have visible barbels. They've got the eye.
It's very low.
Very, very low. Looks almost like the fish is upside down. What can I say about that? That is the biggest authenticated, fully documented freshwater fish, because there's this whole question about what's the biggest freshwater fish in the world. One of those was netted, I think, in the last couple of decades in Thailand, 646 pounds, and it's a vegetarian. I mean, most big fish are predators. That basically eats algae, and incredibly, you can't catch them in the wild. They're practically extinct, not quite in the wild, but there's a lot of them in these sort of commercial stocked fisheries, and it's one of the strongest in terms of stamina. a few. I was aiming for a 200 pounder the last time I was there, and I had one about 180 pounds, and which took an hour or something to get in, and I wanted to catch a bigger one, and you're in a situation where I don't want to hook a 100-pounder because it's going to take me, maybe an hour, and you just feel beaten up. You feel beaten up. Like
are you always trying to catch a plane? We've got to get this thing in because we've got to get to the airport.
Time is a bit of a pressure. That's right. Time is a pressure.
I think are you needlefish fishing here?
What's going on there? Oh yes, that's right. A hand line for needlefish.
Yes, that was an extraordinary one because they're such a peculiar fish. You are a bit of a catfish expert. I mean, you know, some of your most exciting films, well, perhaps just to me, are catfish.
Yes, I mean, a lot of people go, oh, it's another catfish. But if you think about it, so river monsters, it is mostly rivers. Sometimes it's the sea, sometimes it's lakes. But rivers tend to be, as I've mentioned, it's poor visibility. And so, catfish do very well in rivers. So there's lots of species of catfish. I don't know what percentage of freshwater fish, but it's something like there's a very high percentage of catfish in freshwater. So
in the world of YouTube, where I am, the catfish of the River Po, some of those YouTube channels are some of the most popular fishing channels out there.
Absolutely,
and,
yes,
and there's this marvellous thing with catfish, which you don't get with other fish, is basically you get to jump in the water with it, don't you? I mean,
yes,
connect.
Yes, exactly. If you try and lift that fish off the ground, it's not going to work. So the best thing is to jump in the water and get these really dramatic pictures with the catfish.
And as I say, the moment where the catfish actually turns on you, that's a bit of worry. Can I ask you a slightly sort of industry question, which is in the world of fishing presenting, because I must say I am also kind of hit by waves of jealousy when I met you, because back in the early 12th century when I started working in this industry, I put out a proposal to a film company for doing something a little bit like this. Now, this is in the days when fishing programs were dominated by BBC Natural History Unit, basically. Hugh Miles was the kind of the top of the world of fishing. Then we had Channel 5 Sports Department, I think, commissioned extreme fishing, and suddenly fishing on television became something that could be sports, it could be natural history. Now you appear to be characterising a kind of hybrid movement. Perhaps Charles Rangeley Wilson is also there, where you're doing, fishing is a cerebral activity, it is an unusual activity, and it's also a kind of extreme and exciting activity. Is that a fair way of characterising it? Yeah, I mean, people, they love that word extreme, and I often get described as an extreme fisherman, which I sort of hate, but it's the I can't think of a better two-word summary. River Monsters, I don't see it as a fishing show. I see it as a real mixture of it's travel, it's detective story, it's even part fairy story sometimes. It's this the misunderstood monster. It looks ugly, but actually the reason it bit your foot, it didn't actually. It thought it was a small fish, and it was just as surprised as you were when it bit. But I think where I've been lucky is you mentioned natural history, but I mean freshwater fish were very, very neglected. A lot of the fish I've caught you would never see on natural history programs. Again, one of the big problem is visibility. You put the best underwater camera person in the water, they're not going to film anything in zero visibility. The only way you can see it is pull it out on a line. So you've got to go for glamorous fish, really, haven't you? In beautiful blue water, if you possibly can. Yeah. Well, again, you see, I think you talk fish to most people. TV, you're thinking coral reef, beautiful, shiny, colourful fish. Whereas I'm going more for things like the goonch, and I think traditionally with even with anglers, nobody's going to be interested in that. But you get to a point where something is so ugly. I mean, again, we have lots of children watching. I think children, they see something like that, tentacles hanging off not just its mouth but its tail, its fins. It gets your attention. And of course, there's the other thing as well. We humans are just fascinated by predators. So lions, whatever. But if you open up the world of underwater predators, it just gets everybody's attention. Are you scaring people? Are you stopping children from going swimming because they now know what's down there? People do occasionally say to me, I never get in the water now because I watch your programs, and I have to make 2 points. I make. One is the fish that I catch tend to be these days very rare. And the other thing is, the incidents that we report on, some of them are a little bit exaggerated, but, that person, people are not getting attacked all the time. It's a case of being unlucky, being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And the other thing, which is quite educational, is that if somebody is bitten or otherwise, abused by a fish,
it wasn't the fish's fault. It is the job of the person to know that that animal is there, and to understand its behaviour, and therefore to keep out of its way. I mean, a lot of fish will go for you if you're getting too near their nest or their young. So if you know where that is, I mean, if you can see the fish may be moving, okay, I'll keep out of that area. So that, you know, I like to say that you know, I impart some valuable survival skills.
No, what I think is lovely about river monsters is you tell the myths, but you don't mythologise. You know, you had to do the piranha, didn't you? I mean, it's
absolutely, yes. I mean, piranhas. Everybody knows about piranhas, and you know, that is a fascinating story. And most of the time, one thing I did in the program there, I was catching piranhas, and then I just jumped in the water and said, look, they're not touching me. And most of the time, you're fine with piranhas. But they absolutely do have the potential. They really do, and there are genuine stories. Yeah, exactly. There are genuine stories that, you know, incidents that happen where people literally get torn to shreds in moments. So. Again, it's knowing when those situations are. It's normally when the Amazon, you get this massive up and down of the water. In places you're talking 15 meters, 50 feet up and down, and so you get these lakes forming, which get, you know, less and less water. They're drying out, and everything in there is getting really hungry. Everything's eating everything else. You fall in there, you know, no chance.
They've just coloured the water red. That was a post-production colour.
This was a reconstruction. This was us. You know, these are basically these are like normal people we've hired as actors, which we do from time to time. But it is actually reconstructing. In that case, bathers. Sometimes in South America, people get bitten by piranhas. They don't get turned into a skeleton. It'll be one single bite on their foot. And in that situation, what's happened, it's often in the summer, it's in these newly formed reservoirs, they have got too close to the nest.
Yes.
So it is basically, it's a get out of my nest. Yeah. So what that's telling you, piranhas are actually loving parents. And you know, how that, you know, a bit of rehabilitation.
That's not a narrative I expected at all. I'd love to have a look at your air miles account. Are you running out of fish? Is that?
Yes, it's starting to. There's still a few there. I'm not going to say what they are. There's a few there, and also what I'm trying to do is explore slightly different stories. We did. The last thing I did was they changed the name. It's called Dark Waters, but those were odd little stories that I picked up on, over the years that I've been doing
this. Well, you've been around fish for so. I mean, the wonderful example. You know, you've seen the world of fish, haven't you? So there must be stuff that you pick up while you're there.
And fishermen always talk. There's so collecting stories. Some you can obviously discount, but others. I mean, one episode I did, for example, I just heard about. Apparently, there are giant crayfish in Tasmania, the size of a dog. They will break your arm, and so that's not quite a river monster story, but that's definitely something I want to go and see. That's a program I want to do. So we did that last year.
Well, sea monster is, certainly in the UK, sea monster is an established myth, isn't it? We don't have much mythology about river monsters here in Britain, do we?
No, the biggest freshwater. Well, I mean, we've now got non-native catfish, but the biggest sort of native fish, I suppose. Well, that's the predator. Is a pike, and there's always stories. Dogs get. Every village pond. Oh, there's something in there. It takes the dogs. Don't send your children in there.
There's that wonderful. There's a huge fiberglass pike hanging up in one of the boatyards next to Lake Windermere. I think it's at Ambleside, and it came from a 1970s Joan Collins film that was basically the British version of Jaws, and they're going to do about this huge pike in Windermere. Sadly, the robotic pike they had built sank, and so that was the end of that. Okay, I've got a theory I've always wanted to put in front of you. This is my theory, my 16 by 9 theory, and eventually it's going to form the basis of my doctoral thesis, I can tell you. In the world of shooting, which we do on YouTube, the most popular animal to shoot, to watch the hunt of, is the wild boar. And it strikes me that's a fairly 16 by 9 kind of animal. Now, on YouTube, where you get the view counter at the bottom, the most popular fish out of sea and freshwater is, surprisingly, the Goliath grouper, another 16 by 9. Because you might think, the carp or the salmon or something like that. Can you back me up? Could I take this to a university and get my PhD on this one, or am I talking nonsense? You've done needlefish. Was that less successful than your?
When you say so, are you talking the sort of dimension?
It has to be 16 along and 9 down.
To fit the. Yeah, no. Grouper are people are fascinated by them. Not just the size.
They're pretty boring to catch, so aren't they? Just going.
They are really strong. They'll you know, if you're not, they'll pull you out of the boat if you're not careful. They just have that. It's like a bull on the end of the line. And then they've got, they have this massive mouth. They've got the spiky fins. I've also dived, and I found this was interesting. I was in Florida. We were in quite shallow water. We're just testing some gear. I was rebreather diving, so no bubbles, just sort of in stealth mode. And we were seeing some small barracuda, and that cameraman waved me over, pointed. There's this little bit of coral, and there's a cave, and there's this massive group, the size of the cave in there. And so we're working out how to try and get a two-shot. If you're here, and he's here, and I'll try and creep around the back and find another entrance, and sort of. But no, they are fascinating, and they have. Fish do have personality. Species and the individuals, and grouper have this real. They just have this sort of don't care sort of attitude.
That great big mouth looking at you, and that seems to characterise many of the fish you catch. The face of the fish.
It is almost a human expression. You can look at the grouper, and that conjures up a human personality, which exactly coincides with the personality of that fish. I think I don't think I'm just projecting that.
No, I don't. You're perfectly allowed to do that, because the other thing is the audience makes up its own mind. Now, in this film, you're drifting away from rivers and into the sea here. Where are you, and what's going on?
This was in the northeast, and they found we've moved to London there, but just rewinding quickly, they found this very strange fish that washed up. It's some kind of shark, but it doesn't look quite right. What on earth is this? People swim in this beach. And it was actually a Greenland shark. We have these
Greenland shark.
Greenland shark, and they are you find them in the Norwegian fjords. They're up in those latitudes, but they are also, well, the fact that one maybe slightly lost, but I think there was a bit of excitement when that turned up on a beach where people do, if they're quite hardy.
Is it a swimmer eater, or is it mostly a fish eater?
They're right down on the bottom, and they sort of don't really know. I mean, the debate is the received wisdom is it's a very slow, sluggish scavenger. But there's a certain body of opinion going, well, no, we think they could be predatory as well.
It is enormous, isn't it? I mean, it's one of the biggest sharks.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I've caught them up to like 400 pounds. That is a small one. 1,000 pounds would be a big one or more. They're very long-lived as well, and I think there's been some interesting research because they don't have a bony skeleton. They're very hard. You can't age them, but they've worked out a way of aging them from the lens in the eye. And they reckon that 250 years lifespan, but give or take a couple of hundred years, so potentially 400 years. They live very slowly, though. They don't know. An average day is not very exciting.
Do you have? Is there any criticism of what you do? I've got to ask the fish welfare question, because particularly in that case, it's deep. You're bringing it to the surface. You're taking a photograph of it, and then letting it go back down again. But have you done any core damage to it on the way up or the way down? Do you have to face that, or is it?
Yeah, we do actually. Yes, no, Greenland shark. I mean, there's no swim bladder, and so the signs are, and also there are programs with them where they're tagged and they get recaptures so that they know that they're surviving.
Okay, so we know it's fine.
Yeah, but no, fish welfare is a very big thing, because we're putting this out not just to anglers, but we want it to go to the general public. And although I don't sort of verbally go on much about it, one thing that I'm very concerned about is handling the fish in a way. I don't want to be damaged by the fish, but I don't want the fish to suffer either. And also, there might be a few exceptions where it's like an Asian carp, something invasive. But generally speaking, all the fish go back alive, and that really, people who. That sort of sinks in, and particularly when we're talking sort of predatory fish that might occasionally go for people. Why are you putting that back? And again, I think that there is a very strong unspoken conservation message there.
You're a sort of fish traveller. You travel across many areas of fishing. Do you notice that some styles of fishing? I mean, we were talking about this yesterday with Marina Gibson from the Northern Fishing School. some areas like coarse fishing are very good at treating fish, other areas not so good at. I mean, I'm a standard issue trout fisher. I am very bad at handling fish. I know that, and I must get better. Is that true to say?
It is interesting. So I would say, I mean, I'm more of a coarse angler than a game angler, and I know in terms of treating coarse fish, the UK, you get the fish in, you have the, you've got the unhooking mat and all the rest of it. A lot of, the equivalent of coarse anglers in America, for example, are sort of fairly backward in that respect. They're lifting the fish up by the
gills. Yes, that always makes me shudder slightly.
And maybe the fish is going. Catch and release is happening more, but some of the, for example, some of the marine game fishers in the States, for example, now Billfish. They've done sort of research about even if you catch a billfish, put it back in the water, but if it's been out of the water, it reduces its chance of survival. So there are magazines, for example, they won't publish your photograph unless it's in the water. So everybody now can get hold of a GoPro, can do in clear water. You can take a beautiful, even half and half picture of a billfish. They will publish that. If you're holding it out of the water, they won't publish it. Okay. So it's things have moved an awful long way in terms of fish welfare. They still are going, and yes, different parts of the world are at different levels.
One thing Marina said, because she's very aware of how she projects herself, because she puts a lot of stuff on social media. She says whenever she takes a picture of her and a fish, it always has to be touching the water. That seemed to be quite a sensible idea, because I mean, even though it's out of the water, you'll be putting it back quite quickly.
I think that's actually very, very important, because something that has happened to me in the past is I will have an interview for a newspaper, or it might be an online article, and to illustrate that, they take a picture of, they use a picture of me holding a fish. Immediately people come and say, why did this beautiful animal have to die just to satisfy somebody's vanity?
Yes.
And then somebody else will jump in and go, did you watch the programs? That the fish went back alive. Now the thing is, a picture on its own maybe gets separated from its caption. So I think, yes, the fact that fish is touching the water or half in, half out, immediately you remove the opportunity for that assumption. Yes.
Yeah, we have occasional problems like this in trophy hunting. I don't know if you may have noticed, perhaps. No.
Yes, well, exactly. There's always a massive subtext to any story.
Okay, fun stuff. I do need to know your favourite fish. Which is the one you've enjoyed the most? Because you are an angler above all. Which is the best one?
Always a hugely hard question. Possibly the arapaima, South America.
Oh, really?
This is this was the fish that for years in the Encyclopedia Britannica. This is the biggest freshwater fish in the world. I mean, nobody knows for sure what is, but I've just got a lot of history with them. They are. I just read about them when I was a kid. They're very strange looking. They live in the lakes in the Amazon. It's a very elongated fish, a bit sort of pike-like in profile with that dorsal fin.
Very pale,
way back.
Isn't it?
Well, they.
I think I've only seen one in London Zoo. And I think that was very pale.
The coloration is very variable. They can be pale, but they can be incredibly dramatic. In breeding colours, the body, depending on the watercolour, the body can be almost jet black, and then set against that on the edges of the scales and towards the tail, you get this bright cherry red, and it's just the most vivid coloration. And in fact, if you translate the indigenous name for an arapaima is piraruku, and pir, like piranha, it means fish. Ruku, it's to do with a fruit which is bright red, so it basically means red fish, and they have an interesting adaptation. These lakes we've talked about before that gradually get shallower, water's hot, it's deoxygenated, all the fish are going belly up. Arapaima can gulp air from the surface, so they keep going. They keep hunting.
Kind of almost on their way to making it onto the bank, are they?
Well, they can be. You can find very big fish in quite shallow, quite small bits of water.
Grainy picture.
Oh, there we go. There's one there.
Yes, exactly.
Yes, but you can see the coloration there, and that's not a particularly dramatic one. But because of this thing of coming up to the surface, they give their position away. And often what happens is you'll see the tail break the surface, and so hence the name Redfish. You see this bright red something on the surface.
How do you catch it? Looks like you caught it in your hands there.
That was caught on a dead bait. Either you just leave a dead bait and wait, or you can wait until you see the fish and try and position it. I've caught these on fly. I caught a 250 pounder on a fly.
Now you're showing off.
I say a fly. It was something, the classic sort of dead budgerigar, about that long, on a 12 weight rod. And although I'm not a fly angler, I sort of started off my fly fishing at that extreme end. I'm in the process of working my way back down now to the more,
I must say, tying a hook to a macaw and launching it, that doesn't count as a fly. You know that, don't you?
It was a sort of a fly cast. Yeah.
Okay, if I was Australian, I'd say yes, that looks very nice, but surely the Barramundi is more fun, more exciting, better. I mean, how does it compare?
I've not caught a lot of barramundi. Oh, there we go. That's another one.
Isn't that wonderful?
That's one on the fly.
Can I stop you there?
Somebody's reading my mind. What's going on? Is somebody like online? So are you searching for pictures? And then look at that.
He's doing very well.
Is this surveillance state? Somebody's actually reading my mind, and instantly there's a.
This is Aaron, who actually makes fishing programs as well as being our techie person here. So he comes from a kind of moral high ground, I'm afraid.
Barramundi. Yeah, no, I like barramundi. I caught some barramundi last year on. Unfortunately, I don't actually get a lot of time on a shoot to do the fishing. It tends to be very, very, very concentrated. I had one day to catch some barramundi, and I was catching them on surface poppers, but with a lure rod. I mean, I'd have loved to have got a fly rod on that, but they're really good fun on the surface.
Do you suffer from the problem which we suffer from at Fieldsports Channel, which is you should have been here last week?
Yes, that is always our dread. We turned up. You should have been here last week. Unfortunately, sort of being more serious. I mean, a lot of what I do, it's I talk to all the particularly I try and find the old fishermen. Who's the oldest fisherman around here? Let's talk to them. Let's just sort of see if I can download some local intel. And it's generally, even though these people aren't that old, you should have been here 100 years ago. That is all over the world. That is the situation. You read about fish like arapaima, like Goliath tigerfish. The geographical range used to be this, and if you go there now, you won't find them. Only if you go here specifically, just a few places that are quite hard to find.
Well, we had a big fish chat yesterday from Martin Salter from the Angling Trust, who talked about fish around the world, and every single one came back with it's more depressing now than it was 5, 10, 50 years ago.
Absolutely. I mean, the thing is that there are localized good news stories, and I did a series about the world's great rivers a couple of years ago, and we found a place. We saw the arapaima earlier on. There we go. Oh, that's a Goliath tigerfish. The one before was a barramundi. That's the Goliath tigerfish. I was talking to some people in a community in the Amazon.
He's reacted.
It's like, oh, there we go. Barramundi. I mean, they are pretty. They're lovely fish. Silver-like mirror fish. A place we were in the Amazon where people commercially fish arapaima, and this one place had taken charge of their local area, a lot of lakes, and they left it alone for a couple of years. Very hard to sell that to the people, but okay, let's do this. And now we're going to harvest in a sort of sustainable way. We're going to work out how many fish are there, but we're only going to take a percentage. And because it's a fish that can grow very quickly, you're talking about maybe 200 pounds in 10 years, but they have just come back. And for me, the principle there is, the thing about nature is if you give it a little helping hand, it will really bounce back.
So that kind of good news story we would like to see more of, and we're seeing some pretty depressing stories especially about coastal areas of Britain.
I mean, that applies directly. I mean, the whole thing about I'm not an expert on this, but I've been looking into it a lot lately. The marine fishery around Britain. The whole fisheries policy at the moment, it's aimed towards getting populations back up and then fishing sustainably. But if we do the right thing, we can actually have more fish there, generate more money, generate more jobs. But the short term is always to grab as much as we can now, and nobody is really working towards that. But the example of what can be done with, say, arapaima, exactly the same thing could be done. Some reserves. Just keep the fishing out of these reserves. The fish there, they will breed, they'll do well, they'll spill over into the other areas, and then just a bit more managed, sensible fishing. You know, it's absolutely not rocket science, but it's, you know, getting it across is just really hard.
Jeremy has, for me, Jeremy has re-energized fishing. He's made it exciting again. You'll think he's been cloned because he pops up all over the Game Fair site. Quite a lot of Koki Bondi books where you can find the book now. How to?
No, we sold out. I'm afraid.
You sold out.
Yeah,
okay, well, you can find it on
I'll still be
Amazon.
there. I am running off though to the casting pool. I will be doing.
I'll
be doing a bit of a sort of double act thing there.
Well, I don't want to encourage you to leave the theatre, so you can go down. Ladies and gentlemen, Jeremy Wade.